Welcome to this talk. As a service, we're going to be discussing today how digital services are evolving for health and care in Wales. Just to introduce myself first, I'm Hugh Angle. I'm a solutions architect working for Digital Health and Care Wales. So Digital Health and Care Wales, it's a strategic health authority, and it's one of its key responsibilities that I've highlighted here is to deliver high quality digital services. And the team that I work in, the ecosystem team, we grapple with a couple of difficult questions related to delivering those services. So one is figuring out how can we open up these digital services to a wider range of customers, especially those that may be outside of the NHS, so external partners. And second is, how can we better enable NHS teams to make use of digital services that may be provided by partners, not DHCW, but still have those services integrate with our systems and adhere to our standards. So I'm using the phrase here a lot, deliver digital services, assuming that everybody knows what it means. But I realized recently that maybe I don't even know what I mean when I'm talking about it, and that's part of the inspiration for this session today. So 3 ways of thinking about services I've just put up here. So the first is, probably the kind of services that we're most likely to refer to as services very often and to complain about as bad service. So these are the kind of things like going to the bank to get a mortgage, a service, going to your GP, this kind of service. And there's more abstract services as well, related to different processes. And those are very often the things accompanied with lots of form filling, which is very often the cause for complaints and moaning. And we certainly have a lot of form filling processes at DHCW because we have to. And then the second type of service I've put up here, a transaction in which no physical goods are transferred. So this is kind of the direction of where a lot of things are going now. So a lot of software is switching to subscription-based models, and so the rise of cloud computing certainly has big implications for DHCW in how we architect and manage our data and applications. And the third one, depending on your background, you might be familiar with, you might not. If you're a developer, you probably are. So this is where we're talking about a computer application providing an interface that other applications could use to talk to it, to ask it to do stuff. We normally refer to that as an application programming interface or an API. And we also have plenty of those in DHCW, and that's something we have to talk about today as well.
So yeah, thanks for asking me to speak. I'm Rob Ludman. I'm a service management team manager with DHCW, and we look after all the service management arrangements, and I'll explain some of those to you in this brief talk. So how we manage services, first it's important to understand what we mean by service, and Hugh offered some definitions or some reflections on that in the earlier slide. But from a service management context perspective, there are several definitions, and it's not at all settled in industry as far as I can tell in terms of what we mean by digital service. Still a lot of debate raging in the spheres that I listen in on, but the definitions that we reference within DHCW commonly from a service management perspective are these two. First, from ITIL. ITIL is a reference framework for delivery of services, originally IT services, now more broadly applied to services in general, but its root is in IT service delivery, and the definition is a means of enabling co-creation by facilitating outcomes that customers want to achieve without the customer having to manage specific costs and risks. So it's a bit wordy and a bit abstract, but notice the focus on enabling value, co-creation of that value, and the facilitation of outcomes. So it is about the outcome that you're seeking to drive. Customer, and the fact that that customer, we'll think of them as the user of the service, they don't have to manage the costs and risks of the service. And another definition that we reference is ISO 20000, which is the IT service management best practice standard from ISO, a means of delivering value by facilitating outcomes the customer wants to achieve. So again, notice the focus on value and outcome. We don't usually use the word customer in health and care, so we often use the term service recipient or stakeholder instead, just to put it in less of a commercial context. So those are the definitions we typically refer to in service management circles when we mean service. So how do we deliver services? I've put this slide at the front of my deck to explain the standards set that DHCW operate to. The ISO standards or British standards provide sort of industry best practice or accepted ways of working across sectors, and DHCW have a set of these that we're accredited to. That means that we're audited against hard requirements of the standards every 3 years for recertification, and usually every 6 months or every year for surveillance visit by an independent party, which audits DHCW for the way we operate against the requirements in these standards. Now, in terms of service delivery, the main focus is on ISO 20000 and our Service Desk Institute certificate. So I'll explain those in a second, but as a set, they have to operate together as an integrated system to support the way DHCW operates. So at the top of my diagram, I'm trying to illustrate the health and care sector on the left that has service needs, service requirements, and DHCW as an entity, as an organisation, delivering that service back to the health and care sector. And it's important that we have standards as foundations on which to operate. So we've got, for quality, for general quality management, we've got ISO 9001. For our sustainability of operation, environmental focus, we've got ISO 14001. For the way we manage our staff and the way we relate to our people, we've got BS 76000 and 76005 for diversity and inclusion, and we've got links with the British Computer Society and the Federation of Informatics Professionals to provide standards around our professional development. For our data security and integrity, we've got ISO 27001 and BS 10008, which you may not be familiar with. It's a lesser known standard around data integrity in storage and in transit. And then in terms of service delivery, we've got ISO 20000, which is the IT service management best practice standard, and we're currently a 3-star accredited service desk, which is called a customer-led service desk, and that's a rating out of 5, with world class being 5-star, and a basic service desk operation, just call logging and handling, probably like a 1-star. So we've got what we call a customer-led service desk rating. As well as these standards which we're accredited to as an organisation, we're also researching and aligning to several other things. We're following closely the work of the Centre for Digital Public Services, and we're aligning to 22301, ISO 22301, which is the resilience standard, and also because of the medical device directives and the need to comply with regulation in that space for software, we're also looking at ISO 13485, which is medical device quality. Not all of this is in my remit. I'm just trying to explain the landscape of standards that DHCW operate to. So these help the organisation meet the quality benchmarks that our services need to meet. They help standardise our approach and working practices internally, but also with partners and suppliers. They provide clarity and assurance about how we work for our staff internally, but also to our executive and our board and the partners that we work with. And they should provide confidence and trust in the way the organisation operates. Okay, so standards as foundations, how we deliver services. How does that translate into a service management specific context then? So in order to deliver the value or maximise the value that we're delivering in our services, we operate to ISO 20000 requirements. That means our management system is designed and tested against those requirements. So this is a view from the DHCW intranet, what our staff see if they browse through our intranet, of how the organisation represents how it operates. So just to explain, if you haven't worked to ISO standards before, all ISO standards have a set of generic requirements in them that apply to any industry or discipline. So the context of the organisation, leadership elements, policy, roles and responsibilities, how the organisation functions, the planning operations of the organisation, including risk management and opportunity management, objective setting and management of those objectives, and how the organisation supports its resourcing, its competence systems, documented information and knowledge management, etc. All of that stuff is common across almost all ISO standards or British standards. And down the bottom here, we've got two other common areas: performance evaluation for monitoring, measuring, analysis, audit, management review and service reporting. All of that is usually common, and so is the improvement section around improvement and corrective action. So those things are common across most standards, and they're all described for how DHCW operate in our integrated management system. Then specifically for service delivery and service management, we've got a central block, which is usually section 8 in the ISO standards, which describes things like our approach to service portfolio, our relationship and agreement mechanisms, our service assurance mechanisms, design, build, transition, change management, release and deployment, resolution fulfillment processes, supply and demand, capacity management, demand management, etc. So that's all the specific service management stuff. So how do we turn what's in the standard requirements into how we operate as an organisation? We do that by describing our operations in policy, process, templates, work instructions, etc., publishing them in a management system, and that system is audited then and verified to meet the best practice standard. Okay, so just to give you a flavour of some of the things that helps us do as an organisation, going back to that earlier definition of what a service is and the key components of that definition, you've got to understand your customer or your stakeholder. So we have to do stakeholder mapping in the organisation, understand in various formats who are we trying to deliver value to, and what type of value are we trying to deliver to that person? Are they a sponsor? You know, are they authorising the budget for the service? Are they a customer in terms of someone who's interested in the requirements of the service and that service is going to deliver the outcome that they want to achieve? Or are they a user of the service and they want it to enable their role? So we do some of that in DHCW. The definition refers to value as well, so we have to understand the value. This is an example from our Welsh Nursing Care Records service, where the program team mapped the initiative, the outcome intended, and the benefits that the program is trying to deliver. So we have to understand that it has to be evidence-based, clinically led, so that you understand the clinical outcome expected, and we have to focus on user need as well. One of the main pillars of the ISO standard is service portfolio, and your approach to managing your service portfolio. This is just a fun way of demonstrating our service portfolio as a tube map diagram. So we've got our service management line in the middle that runs through everything. We've got our infrastructure line, which is all of the core infrastructure and infrastructure services. And then we've got various clinical lines which span off here and provide different service lines. So it's just a graphical representation, helps people understand the variety of services we have, but it is important that the organisation maintains that service portfolio, all of the information within it, as base data, and it can be represented in many different ways then to different stakeholders for their needs. We also map out, just as another example, the support models for our services, and we start with the user up the top. Our support models are quite complex sometimes with the landscape of health and care in Wales, so the local support provided by the health board themselves is very important, the local service desk and local triage and teams that might support the local infrastructure. Then we work in partnership with local health boards to provide the support to the user, with calls being escalated to our national service desk in DHCW. Then we've got a whole set of teams within DHCW that might provide support for a technical solution. So we've got to be able to route issues correctly to all of those teams. And then we've got partners that also underpin and support our services. So obviously we have to back off all our service agreements with contracts to those partners, and then have the right relationships in place with those partners to provide that user support all the way down through the chain. So this is an example of one of our more recent services, Test, Trace and Protect, which I think is cloud hosted, so it fits quite well with our talk today, and has Microsoft support underpinning that. And just finally, that's all the kind of current state of play in terms of how we deliver services. So standards as foundations, ISO 20000 as a construct to help us make sure we manage to best practice, and some of the things that allows us to do. However, the landscape is changing rapidly, and I like to reference this slide, which is not mine. It's from a chap called Rob Akashok, who's one of the lead architects with the IT for IT framework in the Open Group. I've been looking at this for a little while now, and he describes these different organizational models, these different models that are changing over time. The organizational models changing from hierarchical through to product line, through to swarm organizations. Architecture model changes from monolithic all the way down to microservices and APIs. The development model moving from waterfall through to agile, through to DevOps. Release model getting much more frequent, from infrequent releases to continuous delivery. Practice model, originally process driven, if you're familiar with ITIL, more aligned with ITIL version 2. Process driven originally, through to practice, now really focusing on value stream. The hosting model, again, moving from physical through to virtual through to cloud. And the sourcing model and support model all changing. And lots of people are trying to describe these different changes. So we use frameworks for reference to help us navigate all these changes, and we're at the core aligned to ITIL and me and my team are looking at ITIL version 4 now in terms of how that helps us align to all of these new ways of working at the bottom of this diagram. But we also have to reference some other frameworks as well, which are more suitable for regulatory control, for example, is better served by the GAMP framework. And also I'm seeing a lot more in the literature about the open groups work, particularly the IT for IT framework. So part of my contribution to the evolving landscape will be to help us understand how these frameworks can support moving DHCW to a position where we're adopting a lot of the practices in this bottom row of this diagram. So hopefully that's a neat segue into our next presentation, and I will hand over to Rich.
Thank you, Rob. I'm Richard Matthews. I'm a lead infrastructure design architect at Digital Healthcare in Wales. And I'm here to talk about cloud computing as a service and how DHCW is making the move to the cloud. So I thought I'd start off with just what is cloud computing. So the foundations of cloud computing go back as far as the 1960s. Multiple people sharing compute storage via a network, however, without a clear definition. It wasn't until the early 2000s when Amazon started a series of service launches, including their elastic compute cloud. What we recognize today as modern cloud computing took shape. Then in 2011, the National Institute of Standards and Technology published a clear definition to describe cloud computing. This definition includes characteristics of cloud computing. So it's on demand, it's self-service. You can deploy resources through a shared portal or with code without requiring human interaction. It has broad network access, so this generally means available over the public internet from a range of devices, mobile phones, tablets, laptops, workstations. Resource pooling. So as consumers of cloud, you're operating in a shared platform. You know the location of that cloud service, but you don't know physically inside their data centers where your workload is processing. But you know that it's part of a pool of resource. Rapid elasticity. So you can very quickly scale resources up or down depending on load, and this can also be automated. And it's a measured service, so how much processing, storage or bandwidth is being consumed, and report against that for billing. Also, there are different service models for cloud computing. The first one it's described as software as a service, SaaS. The second service model is described as platform as a service, and the third one there we've got infrastructure as a service. So software as a service is where you're using the cloud provider's application. So examples of this would be Office 365, Zoom. Platform as a service is where you're using the cloud provider's platform to create your own applications using programming languages, libraries, and tools supported by the provider. And then infrastructure as a service is where you're using the cloud provider's infrastructure to deploy fundamental computing resources like virtual machines, networks, storage, that kind of thing. Benefits of cloud computing. Well, we kind of know it's faster provision. you can sign up and once you've signed up with a credit card, you can immediately start deploying resources. We've mentioned broad network access, so public cloud is typically available over the internet. So this provides enormous flexibility. Scalability, again, we talked about the rapid elasticity. So if you need to increase compute storage, either short term or longer term, you can do that very quickly. And security. One of the benefits of using the cloud is, although it's on the internet, the top cloud providers have to ensure that their platform is secure for people to operate. There's obviously reputational risk for them. Cloud providers make very large investments in keeping their platform secure. So recently, Microsoft has announced that they're going to invest 20 billion in cybersecurity over the next 5 years. You know, most organizations obviously can't compete with that level of investment. And technology refresh. So it's the responsibility is on the cloud provider to make sure that the platform hardware hosting environment is updated and supported. I just talked about the service models. I just want to draw your attention to the diagram here to talk about the benefits associated with each of those as well. So looking at the diagram, essentially we've got a stack of components that make up the platform, the hosting platform. On the right hand side, we've got all greens for software as a service. So essentially the cloud provider is responsible for managing and maintaining each one of those components. So starting at the very bottom there, the basic level, the networking, the storage, servers, the virtualization layer. So the cloud provider is responsible for maintaining all those components. So from a consumer point of view, that takes away an awful lot of management overhead and headache. Secondly, we've got platforms as a service. Again, here the cloud provider is doing a lot of heavy lifting, supporting the network, the storage, the virtualization layer. As a cloud consumer, you're responsible for the building the application and managing the data, but everything else is the cloud provider. And then we've got infrastructure as a service, where the cloud provider is responsible for providing the hosting platform, and then you as a cloud consumer are responsible for deploying the virtual machine with the operating system and the applications and the data. And then finally, we've got, leads me into my next slide really, is we've got traditional on-premise hosting model, where as a provider of digital services, you're responsible for the whole stack, which, I say, moves me on to my next slide. So how is DHCW making the move to the cloud? Well, I'll just talk about the current landscape. So just going back to that traditional on-premise hosting model, we are responsible for pretty much the whole stack. So it's on-premise, number of hardware components, networking, storage, operating systems, all those things to manage. And those things are deployed and implemented in what we call the IT asset management lifecycle. And this lifecycle starts off with bidding for funding, capital funding to get the equipment. Once the funding is approved, we go out to procurement to buy the assets that we need to deliver that service. And once the procurement is awarded, we then deploy those IT assets typically on premise into our data centers. And once they're deployed and they're into service, we then have a process of maintenance. So those IT assets have to be maintained, they have to be updated, patched, and that kind of thing. And then eventually, those technologies become well, they're no longer supported by the platform, the providers, the vendors, and then we have to look to decommission those assets and replace. So we're in this cycle that typically evolves around 5 to 7 years, which is an overhead for the organization to manage. Then from a connectivity point of view, the current landscape is most of our digital services are provided over what we call the NHS Wales Public Sector Broadband Aggregation Network. And this PSBA it was a £74 million contract that was awarded by the Welsh Government back in 2007. And the principle back then was it was a shared network for education, health, and local government. And in its day was quite a groundbreaking concept, particularly when you're looking at sharing IT services between health and social care. However, now we're moving into this cloud computing approach for delivering IT services. The traditional network boundaries that we are familiar with PSBA are eroding, and this needs to evolve really to be able to support a more flexible and integrated way of working with other organizations. Okay. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted DHCW's move to the cloud. So we've seen a big acceleration in adoption of cloud in the last 12-18 months. Initially, this was remote working, so it was everybody was unable to, or very limited access to the office. So IT services were rolled out quickly to provide things like access for GPs to work remotely, video consultation services for patients, and mobile device access to some of our clinical services, like the Welsh Clinical Portal, for example. We've seen an increase in third-party suppliers to NHS Wales specifying cloud as their preferred hosting platform. And finally, we've seen an increase in demand for sharing data outside of the NHS Wales network. So our integration with third parties for things like demographics, pathology results, vaccines, that kind of thing. Challenges that we face of moving to the cloud. We've got a lot of our systems are using legacy technologies, so things like client server based applications that were really designed to operate on a local network. So it's looking at those types of systems and whether they need to be rehosted, refactored, or completely re-architected to operate in the cloud. Funding, there's two sides to this really. There's how we as an organization fund cloud, because it's consumed as a utility, so it needs a revenue funding stream rather than that capital purchasing that I was talking about earlier with the IT assets. But there's also the challenge of how do we control how much spending we're consuming in the cloud as well, and how do we ensure that's distributed across the services appropriately. Integration. So a lot of the a lot of our IT systems are heavily integrated with one another to provide that kind of single patient view. So by moving services into the cloud, we need to think very carefully about how we approach that and maintain that ability to integrate systems to keep that single patient view. Technology lock-in, so there is a risk of moving your applications into the cloud that you then become dependent on a particular technology from that cloud provider. So it's balancing the benefit of that platform versus the risk of being locked in. Thinking about things like exit costs, how much does it cost to get your data out of the cloud? Connectivity and security, as I mentioned before, the approach has been to use a private this PSBA network as a way of as a boundary to protect our services. Some of those approaches are no longer applicable in the cloud. Governance assurances for things like data sovereignty. So what government rules apply in a particular country where your data has been hosted, and then where you choose to host that data in the cloud. And then there's skills and knowledge. So it's preparing the workforce to deal with this big change in technology, and that's not just developers. That's kind of across different areas: information governance, cybersecurity specialists, and all those existing policies and processes that you have at the moment to assure your systems. So our approach to move to the cloud, as I mentioned, we had the COVID pandemic, which accelerated our adoption of some cloud, I would say SaaS. We have a data center transition project underway at the moment that's in its final stages, and this has been used as an opportunity to look at replatforming some of our services into the cloud and try and reduce our on-premise footprint. So our existing governance processes, we have cloud risk assessments working alongside. So that's basically looking at what kind of data are we looking to store in the cloud, and do we have the right controls in place to protect that data. DHCW is in the process of defining a cloud strategy. So this is basically agreeing what the principles of how we will use cloud and consume cloud going forward. And as part of that, we're looking at multi-cloud. So there are situations where other cloud providers platforms are the preferred, the best option technically for a particular type of application. And then finally, integration, looking at opening up access to a lot of the APIs that we have inside the NHS Wales network, and using and starting to put those building blocks in place. That's it from me. Thank you. I shall hand over to my colleague Barry, who's going to talk a little bit about opening up the architecture.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So I'm Barry McDermott. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect at Digital Health and Care Wales. And today, as you can see, I'm going to be talking about how we are opening up our architecture. So who are we? We're Digital Health and Care Wales, and I'm a member of a team called the Digital Health Ecosystem Wales team. And we've embarked on a journey to open up NHS Wales' systems and data to developers through a platform of APIs, reducing development time and ensuring products are better suited to NHS Wales' needs. So in opening up our architecture and in some ways our data, what this means is we're going to be opening up our APIs. So today I'm going to talk about what are APIs or web services, what are the challenges we've faced on our journey to doing this, and how are we actually going ahead and going to do this, open up our architecture, and what does this mean if I'm a person who wants to come in and connect with us, someone with a contract with us, or a developer working with NHS Wales. So what are APIs and web services? Well, an API is an application programming interface. It's how computers talk to each other. It usually involves a contract between a provider, the person providing the API, and a user, someone who's accessing the API. Typically today, we talk about web services or web APIs, and the word web here implies support for common and known internet protocols like HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol, the kinds of things you can access with a browser. So the great things about modern web services are any computer with an HTTP capable device like a phone or a tablet or a desktop computer. Anyone can access these web services, so they're easy to access. So here's two kinds of web services, or APIs rather, that are often referred to on the web. The first one there is a web service, and that's a slightly older generation of API, still very widely used, that uses something called SOAP, which is a form of XML, extensible markup language. And you'll see there, and in the end, there's a tag. It's got the name, Bob, so it's XML's tags. This is a way of passing data in a file structure with these kind of tags. A web API is a common, now modern use sort of API, and it uses something called REST, which means that we are dealing with modern or common HTTP verbs like post, get, put, and delete. And the fragments of data we pass between computers over the internet are usually in JSON, and there's a little example of a fragment of JSON there. It's a bit lighter than XML. APIs are usually named according to their purpose. So Google Maps API is obviously going to give you map access, and the Welsh Demographic Service is obviously going to give you demographics. And then the security on APIs is based on the kind of data sensitivity that they expose. So maps need low security, and patient demographics obviously need a high level of security. So let's look at an example of APIs. Here's an API. If you've got Facebook on your phone, you're already using APIs. They're all over the internet. And you can see this is an example of a message being sent. It's a post. That means we're sending data to the Facebook server. So you might be sending a post over saying, can you give me a list of what my friends are up to? And you'll be getting a response in JSON to your phone over the internet. It's a packet of data. Your phone knows how to interpret that, and it'll display it on your screen. So that's an example of an API. And then in healthcare terms, we have many healthcare applications which use APIs, and this is an example of a request to the Welsh Reference Data Service, WRDS, to get details of an organization. A GET means I'm reading data, so it makes a request to a server and data comes back. As an organization, we are already using APIs across many of our systems. So if you have a look at the blue bar across the top of this diagram here, you'll see many systems you'll recognize if you've had interaction with a health system. There's pharmacy systems. We've got a cancer system called Canis. We've got a radiology system called Radis. So these are all systems that are within the PSBA network, which is what Richard referred to, and they're used widely across hospitals, all over Wales. And if you look down the bottom of this diagram in yellow here, these are actually APIs. And so these are points where computers can go to another computer, get information and retrieve information. So for example, this one on the bottom left here is WCRS, is the Welsh Care Record Service. So that's about storing patient data. So the computer system will be sending data across, it'll be stored in the API and then retrieved. And similarly, across many of our systems, we've got APIs. On the right here, the WAMS is the Welsh Address Matching Service, and their WRDS is the Welsh Reference Data Service. So if the child health system needs information about a pharmacy or an organization, they can send a packet of information and say, can I please find out about your pharmacy address, and it will receive a message back. So we used APIs widely across our systems already, but so how are we going to make them available to people who want to connect with us? Well, first, let's talk about the challenges we faced in doing this. When we started as a team, the first thing we ran into was there was no complete catalog of APIs. So we had the organization was using them widely, but we didn't have a single point we could go to find them. And so we started a catalog. And if you go to our developer portal there, developer.nhs.wales/APIs, you can go and visit that site. You'll see we've cataloged many of the APIs that we use across the organization already. Next challenge, there were varying kinds of API technologies in use. There was SOAP, Simple Object Access Protocol. It was REST, different kind of API. And then there was HL7, which is a way of sending healthcare information using XML. So we had a mixture of kinds of technologies that were in use. Next challenge is we had a variety of security implementations, different certificates, API keys, different ways of using firewalls. And some of the ones in use were secure, but they were kind of hard to use. Some of them were older and needed updating. So across our organization, we had work to do if we were going to let people come and connect with us in an easy and kind of seamless way. We had a mixture of things going on in our back-end systems. And lastly here, the other big challenge we faced was there was no common access request process across many different teams. So if you wanted to use the Welsh address matching service, you might have to send an email to someone and fill out some forms and do some security. If you wanted to go and use the Welsh reference data service, you might have a completely different experience. So this is not what we wanted to give users. This is not the kind of picture you want. So we started on this work of how are we going to solve these challenges and how are we going to present a way that people can connect with us, find our information, find our APIs in an easy to use way. So we started looking at a product called API management. This is how many of the companies that exist today are opening up their architecture and opening up their data. So what this slide is showing us here is in red are three of them, the key features that an API management product gives you. So what we have here is we've got a healthcare app and we've got our happy user here on the left. And in the dotted line on the right, we've got our back-end computers with all our data we want to access. So what API management does is it sits in front of our systems like this, and it gives us a few things. Firstly, it gives us a developer portal. As I said, and it's referred to later in the slides, we've got one. We'll probably be reworking it, but you can go and look at it. And what does this developer portal do? Well, it lets you find our APIs. It lets you find how to connect them. It lets you understand our security requirements, and it documents what they are and what we'd need from you if you want to connect to us. So it's a way of helping you find and request access. API management gives you a gateway. A gateway is a series of proxies. That's something representing an actual backend API, and it enables us to do everything in this box down here for all of our APIs. It enables us to do traffic management and rate limiting, which is really important in our systems. So we're not going to allow one person to come in and sort of say, well, I'm going to make 50,000 requests per second because that's just going to play havoc with our backend systems. So like this gateway enables you to manage traffic, the limits on the rates that people can access. It gives us dashboards and monitoring. And really importantly, it enables us to do great security, consistent security across all our APIs. And of course, the other thing API management gives us is an admin portal, which is not really shown on here, which you can go in and maintain and manage all your APIs. So we've been on a journey to procure and implement an API management product to enable people to connect and come in and access our data and our architecture. Sorry, I skipped over there. So this is just a diagram just to show you the kinds of things we were wanting to do. Down at the bottom of the diagram, these are actually individual APIs: WCRS, the Welsh Care Reference Service; WRRS, the Welsh Reporting and Requesting Service. This supplies blood results, for example. And if you're a user up here and you're coming in with your application or your mobile phone, you don't want to have to understand how to talk to WCRS because it's different from how to talk to WRRS, and it's different on how to talk to WRDS. You just want a seamless integration experience. So what API management is going to let us do is give us a nice experience layer across here, so users can come in and just say, well, I just want to access patient information. And then it'll let us define APIs at a process level here, because we know that you actually need to call 3 APIs under the hood to get the information you need. So this is orchestration. So it'll enable us to establish an orchestration layer so that we can give people who are connecting with us a seamless and a great experience. Really, that's what we've set out to do. So just in summary, how are we opening up our architecture? Well, we're implementing an API management platform, and this is software that will enable us to quickly and securely allow people to find us, use our APIs, provides things like caching, authentication, who are you, security, constant security, so we know who you are, and basically, yeah, to get our data out in a consistent way, in a clear way. So lastly, what does this mean for me? Well, work on our API management platform is just beginning. We're just at the early stages of procurement. Our developer portal, there's our address, is due for an overhaul, but we welcome your feedback and anything there. We're aiming for a full rollout of all our APIs by somewhere near the end of 2023, but we may have some up before then. And just to reiterate, we've got no current plans to just open everything sort of wholesale. You'll still need a contract with NHS Wales or Health Board or similar to connect with us. But we would aim to have clear explanations on our portal, on our developer portal, to explain the rules and the processes of connecting with us. That's me at the end of my slide. So thanks very much.